And on our side, the GMH is a global organization that aims to support governments in reducing methane emissions 35% by 2030, 45% by 2040, which is the fastest way to reduce warming in the short term. To summarize some of the things that we're doing together with the issue of methane mitigation, last year, for example, the Subnational Methane Action Coalition, SMAC, was created, mostly talking about waste emissions or trash. So we talk SMAC and trash in this setting, which now includes 18 states, provinces working together to slash methane emissions. SMAC is free to join and provides data tools and policy support through researchers at UC Berkeley. I'd like to take a moment to point out Berkeley researchers Shivani Shukla and Jill Damon. Please free to see them afterwards if you're interested to learn more about SMAC. But also, during COP27, the Subnational Climate Action Leaders Exchange was also created, the partnership SCALE, to help catalyze transformative climate action. And from that, of course, we have to point out there's a problem, we need to point out solutions, and we need to find funding of those solutions. So from that, there's a new initiative, SCALE, which was generated, which is Lowering Organic Waste Methane, or Low Methane Partnership, which was launched at COP28 to jumpstart a dramatic scale-up of global action to cut methane emissions on a global sector, on the waste sector, and obviously with a funding goal of $10 billion per year. So now the introduction of today's session will include a speech from Governor Tim Tae-hum from the South Cheongjeong province of South Korea, whose government has been paving the way to reduce methane emissions in the waste sector, I have to say. We in Chile have been really impressed about the progress, for example, that Korea provides in the development of technologies to address organic waste management as the leaders they are. We will then welcome a cross-geography panel to spotlight global subnational methane action with representatives from 3 states and regional governments, a combination to those already part of SMAC and those interested in joining. So thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to enriching conversation on methane today. I'd like then to thank Governor Kim Tae-hum for joining us and invite him to the stage. Welcome, Governor.
여러분 반갑습니다. 대한민국 충청남도 지사 김태훈입니다. 세계 각국의 기후 리더 여러분들과 함께 메탄 감축 방안을 논의하게 돼서 기쁘게 생각을 합니다.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure and honor to meet you all. I'm Kim Tae-hum, Governor of Chungcheongnam-do Province in the Republic of Korea, and I'm honored to be invited to this meaningful gathering to discuss critical issues of methane mitigation and reduction.
충남은 한국 지방정부 최초로 메탄 감축 로드맵을 수립했습니다. 2030년까지 10억 9천만 불을 투자해 35% 감축을 이뤄낼 것입니다.
Chungcheongnam-do became the first local government in Korea to publish a methane mitigation roadmap. By 2030, we aim to reduce methane emissions by 35%, allocating $1.9 billion towards this goal.
현재 충남에서 배출되는 메탄의 84%는 농축산업 분야에서 발생하고 있습니다. 충남은 소 50만 마리, 돼지 230만 마리, 닭 3,200만 마리 등을 키우는 대한민국 축산의 1번지입니다. 문제는 대부분 축산 농가들이 영세하고 산재에 있어서 악취와 질병, 온실가스에 대한 과학적 관리가 어렵다는 점입니다.
Since 84% of methane emissions in Chungcheongnam-do come from agriculture and live farming, a significant reduction here could be making a game changer and very transformative. And Chungcheongnam-do is the leading region in Korea for meat production, with 500,000 heads of cattle, 2.3 million pigs, and 32 million chickens. But this also contradicts our irony, because most of our cattle farming operations are small and medium-sized, and making them vulnerable to issues like stench, disease control and greenhouse gas emissions. It's almost impossible to monitor and manage their farms significantly and systematically, which intensified other problems and then solve public grievances.
그래서 저는 2022년 7월 취임하자마자 축산의 새로운 모델을 만들기로 했습니다. 산업단지처럼 대지 30만 두를 한데 모아서 사육부터 육가공까지 원스톱으로 끝내고 가축 분유를 활용해 전기를 만드는 스마트 축산단지를 조성하여 농축산 분야의 탄소 중립을 실현해 나갈 생각이었습니다.
Recognizing this challenge, I set out my priority to create a model for sustainable livestock farming when I took office as governor in July 2022. My plan was to develop a smart live farming complex consolidating 300,000 pigs into an industrial hub where farming, processing, even manure-based power generation could be integrated all together as a one-stop service. This would serve as a role model for carbon and methane mitigation in agriculture, I believe.
하지만 지역 주민들의 반발과 또 정치인들이 해당 이슈를 정쟁화하여 사업 추진에 어려움이 있었습니다. 그래서 사업을 6만 도 규모로 축소하여 추진한 후 지역 주민들과의 소통을 통해서 점차 확대할 계획입니다.
However,
또한 축산 환경 개선을 위해 전담 기관을 유치하였고 저메탄 가축 관리 시스템을 구축하였습니다.
However, this encounters significant problem. This ambitious proposal faced strong resistance and resentment from the local residents, and political divisions polarized the opinions of the public. As a result, I had to downsize my original plan to pilot program involving only 60,000 pigs instead. Once the pilot proved successful, we addressed public concerns through reach out and then town hall meetings, and I plan to extend this model to back again on the track to extend this kind of the other industrialized farming as into other regions gradually.
메탄 영농 신기술과 함께 메탄 발생률을 40% 이상 감축할 수 있는 벼 품종을 직접 개발해 보급하고 있습니다. 이를 통해서 농축산 분야 메탄 100만 톤을 감축할 것입니다.
We also plan on the agricultural sector. We are promoting the low methane rice varieties which can cut up to 40% of the methane emissions. On the grain cultivation, this is a main staple, and then this will be another game changer. And in terms of administrative support, we plan to establish the country's first institution dedicated to improve livestock raising environment, and then R&D for the improved varieties of the plant. And this will surely have the effort to transform ourselves to a low methane management system for farms and agriculture.
폐기물 분야에서는 통합 바이오가스 시설을 설치하여 유기성 폐자원 에너지화를 확대하고 생활자원 해수센터와 소각시설 확충으로 직매립을 제로화하여 메탄 19만 톤을 감축할 것입니다.
On the waste treatment front, we are introducing integrated biogas processing facilities to convert organic waste into energy, aiming for the zero waste disposal in landfills. These efforts alone will reduce 190,000 tons of methane emissions.
에너지 산업 분야에서는 바이오가스를 활용한 수소 생산 시설을 확대하고 산업 밀집 지역 온실가스 측정망 확충과 탈루 메탄 실측 모니터링을 강화하여 메탄 4만 톤을 감축할 것입니다.
In addition, in the energy sector, we are scaling up hydrogen production using biogas. Meanwhile, in our manufacturing heavy areas and industries, we are implementing continuously through thorough monitoring system to reduce sleep methane emissions by 40,000 tons.
또한 이 자리를 빌려 국가 간 연대와 메탄의 획기적 감축을 위하여 국제사회에 제안을 드리고자 합니다. 글로벌 메탄 감축 로드맵 수립을 위하여 충남처럼 각국이 메탄 감축 목표를 구체적으로 설정하고 적극적인 실천을 제안합니다. 또한 효율적인 실행을 위해 국제적인 연구 및 기술 교류 네트워크 구축을 제안합니다.
Now, with this opportunity, I would like to make a few proposals to strengthen global solidarity on significant methane reduction and mitigation. And my first proposal is every nation and region and city should endorse the Global Methane Pledge and present their methane reduction roadmap as we did, Chungnam did this year. And as we did, and then we should be targeting with the specific goals, and then these will be shared with the set clear methane reduction target and works together to monitor progress. And I would like to see we are together establish a global R&D center and for the technical knowledge sharing and data sharing. So I believe that this can customize our efforts and methane mitigation solution tailored to the needs of each region and nation.
오늘 함께하신 글로벌 메탄 허브 마르셀로 메나 CEO께서 지난 3월에 발표한 자료에 따르면 한국인 10명 중 9명은 메탄 감축의 필요성을 매우 중요하게 인식하는 것으로 나타났습니다. 메탄 감축에 대한 관심과 이해 그리고 행동, 지지도 또한 전 세계에서 한국이 가장 높은 것으로 나타났습니다. 그런 만큼 책임을 가지고 대한민국의 충남이 메탄 감축을 강력하게 이끌어 나가겠습니다. Thank you.
Since we have Mr. Marcelo Mena, I would like to take a reference of the recent survey done by the Global Methane Hub, conducted in March this year. The Global Methane Survey conducted, and then in which in the survey found that 9 out of 10 Korean people recognize the urgency and then necessity of reducing methane emissions. This broad public support strengthened our leadership in methane reduction in Korea. And then feeling the weight of these responsibilities and duty on my shoulders, I would like to continue my lead with commitment and urgency. As I promise here today, I will work toward methane mitigation in Korea and beyond. We need to do something about it, and then I promise it's time. We should do more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Governor, that was quite excellent. And as you could hear from the governor, because we usually think that governments could only do waste management or limited things, but when you heard from the speech, manure management, enteric fermentation, the hard stuff, so really great ambition that the governor has shown here. And that survey that he was talking about is a global survey. You could look at your own jurisdictions, but the too long didn't read version of it is people support regulations on methane. They are, when they hear about what it really means, they support it even more. So this is really good news. But Korea has the highest support of all, so congratulations to the government there. So in a moment, I'll hand over to our moderator, Mark Davis from Capterio. Mark leads a British company called Capterio, which works in the energy space to help companies, governments, national oil companies to drive down emissions. His work is powered by near real-time analytics of every facility worldwide. There's going to be a lot of help with the new satellites too, I assume. So welcome to the stage, Mark.
Thank you. Just a few brief opening remarks, and thank you, Marcelo, and thank you, Governor. The work we're doing in Capterio is in the energy space, and we work with companies to improve visibility, to improve operations, and to find real-world solutions. And it's great that Helen Clarkson, in her opening speech yesterday, highlighted methane. It's incredibly important. It's one of her 7 to-do lists. Because, number one, methane is deadly. We all know the numbers, 80 times more potent than CO2. And of the 575 million tons, 60% is anthropogenic, is from us, 40% is from agriculture, 34% from fossil, and 19% from waste. If it was an industry at market prices, this would be a $150 billion annual industry in terms of revenue. Secondly, it's accelerating. Methane, since 2007, has risen significantly. We don't really know why. The science is not particularly clear. Some of it's due to wetlands, some of it's even due to COVID. And thirdly, and most importantly, it is fixable. We must reduce methane at source. we must increase its combustion conversion to carbon dioxide, and we must maybe think about removals too. And this is why, of course, 158 countries signed up to the Global Methane Pledge. And it's a race to make this happen. But a report that came out last week from Kairos suggested that actually in 11 of 13 petroleum provinces, the actual numbers are not down. They're actually up by 20%. It's really food for thought. So to drive change, we need three things. Number one, we need to embrace the avalanche of data. That's something that Marcelo just mentioned. We need to know where to intervene and where we're seeing successes. Secondly, we need policies, regulation, and their enforcement, by the way, but also incentives. And thirdly, we need to accelerate on-the-ground action, and that's to create the true win-win partnerships between governments, between businesses, and between the financial community. And we can turn methane from a villain, the villain of today, like Darth Vader, and we can turn him into a hero, because there's a real win-win. We can create value, as we heard. We can create value, we can accelerate the energy transition. And that's exactly the kind of transformative alliance that Governor Kim was talking about. So on that note, I'd like to acknowledge the leadership of those that are going to be joining me on the panel today, where SMAC, the initiative that Marcel talked about, the subnational methane action coalition, is really playing a key role. We'll hear about some of the progress made. We'll hopefully share some learnings, and we'll be able to figure out how to drive this success at scale. So please welcome to the stage our three panelists. Honourable Commissioner, the Governor of Cross River State, Oten Iwa. Please join us. Secondly, Undersecretary for the Environment, the Government of Querétaro, Mexico, Ricardo Xavier Torres Hernandez. And thirdly, Deputy First Minister and Cabinet Secretary for Climate and Rural Affairs of Government of Wales, Hugh Aranka Davis. Please join us. So, lots to unpack. Let's get stuck in. I'll come to you first, Undersecretary Hernandez. We know that agriculture is huge, 144 million tons of methane, and livestock are the major source. And each cow apparently produces a bathtub of methane per day, which is quite an incredible statistic. So you've done a lot of work. I'd like to hear what initiatives have you put in place in Querétaro to mitigate methane from livestock?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, well, in Querétaro, we are working with a public policy based on three things. Mainly in the ordinance and our normativity, we are developing our environmental, climate change, and also circular economy normativity that can reinforce in the apply of methane reductions policy in first term. Second, we are doing by economic incentives based on taxes. We have a $34 tax related for the industry and agro-industry sector, but the livestock producers and sector can develop projects in order to reduce methane emissions, and then they can sell their reductions to the industry, to the industry based in Querétaro, and we have more or less 1 million ton markets inside the state of Querétaro in which all this sector can develop and sell these kind of emissions. And we are working in three main projects. We are developing an enteric digestion project, but we discovered that it's very expensive, so we need more or less $90 per ton for reduce the methane emissions coming from this especially. And on the other hand, we are working with the manure management in the state, in which we are developing a diagnosis in which we can determine the baseline of the methane production coming from this the actual management model in the state, and then join all the manure and taken into a biodigester, and we have now two options: produce electricity with these biodigesters, or insert the gas in the grid and use as a biogas for many other kind of industry that can use, because it depends of the federal regulatory management that the way in which we are going to conduct this. And that way also the producers can sell the methane emission reductions coming from the baseline, from the actual model of management of the manure, and that's the way in which we are talking. And on the other hand, we have in Querétaro we have more or less 500 million cows, half million cows. So we are working with extensive producers in order to develop regeneration livestock in the field in Querétaro in order to capture about 2 carbon CO2 equivalent and sell carbon credits per hectare in the state of Querétaro. So we have these 2 projects in order to reduce the emissions coming from this special sector.
Fantastic. I love the sort of positive story here. You've converted a waste product into a valuable product, and you've used it to improve reliability of power for people in the local communities. That's an incredible journey.
Yeah. That's the way in which we are working now. We have some meetings with local stakeholders, including the industry sector that is going to purchase the carbon credits, and also with the livestock sector. And that's going on, and probably next year we are going to have some carbon credits for the internal carbon market in Querétaro.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on your great work. Turning to you, Honourable Commissioner, you're a key member of the subnational methane action coalition, and waste is a key sort of focus here. You've recently delivered policies to manage waste and to improve disposal. Tell us about what's working and what you've done and what the impact has been.
Thanks a lot, Mark. My pleasure to be here. I was at COP28, where we had some of these conversations, and I'm glad to share our journey, our story. In Cross River State, we recognize the need for urgent action, to tackle methane emissions. And as part of our broader strategy, right, we have, as part of our broader climate mitigation strategy, we have set up, we recently set up, done policy to set up a Council on Climate Change, Cross River State Council on Climate Change, as well as a Green Economic Commission. Now, these 2 institutions are to drive robust policy in thematic areas such as mitigation, adaptation, biodiversity, and all of that. And so what we've done, particularly in tackling waste, especially solid waste in Cross River State, is we have recently turned one of our waste spots called Lemna, where we've recently done a feasibility study to convert that waste to energy. And we are just currently at the implementation stage of that project. And as you recognize, the project requires a lot of funding. We're glad to enjoy the support of the European Union and the French government on this particular project. But also, as part of our strategy, is to then turn that into value, like we have expressed here, by selling the energy to residents around there. So that is the work we're currently doing around waste management, solid waste management in the state.
And how did you build the coalition to make this project actually happen? How did you engage with local communities to make it something they really were driving for as well?
Yes, because this site has been a site for a while, and I mean, of course, we all know the challenges that such a waste site poses. So the communities were willing, when we brought in the project, they were willing to work with government and private sector to develop that project, particularly because of the value that the energy was going to bring to local businesses around the community.
Thank you. First Minister Anka Davis, you've also had a similar journey, I think, in waste, but it's in the context of the UK being one of the first countries to commit to net zero and, of course, the Welsh government fully supporting that. Tell us about your work in waste and how the new government is really driving and accelerating this work.
Waste for us has been an interesting journey, and not without challenges, but not without successes either. And part of being here is sharing those experiences to see where we can learn. We've taken massive strides for example, in waste going to landfill. So we introduced several years ago a tiered landfill tax, specifically designed to steer away from all waste, but particularly biogenic waste as well, going to landfill. What a waste of resource that was in doing that. And it has succeeded. So last year, for example, across the whole of Wales, 1.6% of municipal waste went to landfill. 1.6%. That's how far we've taken it down and down and down. And we've done it through partnership working with local authorities. It has been challenging, working with operators as well in order to drive that change. And it's not unrelated as well, I have to say, our approach to waste and the circular economy, what we're also doing with recycling. And that's been also not without challenge, but again, with remarkable success. By the way, I'm saying this is an area that we've really driven at in Wales, driven by targets and very high ambitions, but there's other areas that we've still got to make progress in, including agriculture and in the wider energy field as well. But in terms of recycling now, we are second in the world. We are a fraction of being first in the world. And in order to get to that, that's been quite a challenging approach, and we're still going through it in some ways as well. But we are succeeding. So driving down landfill, driving down the unnecessary waste of biogenic material, and also fitting that into the circular economy piece. But we've still got a big job of work to do, particularly within agriculture. And we are starting to do that. So we, as you know, have gone through the experience of coming out of the EU. So we've also come out of that framework that we had of not only funding for agriculture, but also environmental protections and the wider wraparound. So we're taking forward a piece of Wales in the moment called the Sustainable Farming Scheme. We're working through it intensely. You'll be very familiar with this. You really have to work with stakeholders whenever you're looking at a transition within farming and agriculture. But the idea is that we also tackle emissions within this as well. So as well as good food, affordable food, high productivity within farms, also delivering nature gains, biodiversity gains, and tackling emissions. We're not fully there yet, so I'm really interested in learning the pieces going on. And across the wider Welsh Government Cabinet, that collective buy-in to actually deal with emissions and methane across energy as well.
That's fantastic. And there are obviously some parallels with the work you've been doing as well here in terms of livestock under Secretary Hernandez. But just bridging on to waste and the work you've done, can you just tell us a bit more about your focus on waste?
Yeah, as I said before, in Querétaro we have developed a carbon tax mechanism because it's a compensable tax in which the companies can reduce the tax payment if they implement in setting or offsetting their own emissions. At the same time, they can reduce their own emissions in their facilities. But in the other way, we are trying to develop this carbon tax were designed in order to pay and finance our decarbonization pathways inside the state. And one of the main of our emissions are coming from waste management in the cities, and also at a state level. So we are now trying to develop some projects related with waste management, avoiding methane emissions, in which we can offer some projects to the companies, to the local companies, to reduce their tax payment. So we are working especially with organic waste in the cities, especially in the capital city of the state, that is the same name, Querétaro capital city, which produce around 2 million tons of waste every year, so every day. So we are trying to reduce the organic part of the waste management that represents about 60% of the total waste of the city, and by two things. We are now producing compost and separating the waste in the houses of the people, and then sent to a different management facilities in which we can produce compost. We have a pilot study in one of the municipalities in the state, and we are working very well with this. And on the other hand, we are trying to use separating and dry all the waste in a facility, a special facility in the municipality, and then use it as a fuel in a cement production facility. So we're taking and we're avoiding this. In the last example, we are working with the food bank, in which we can, before they go to the landfill, we are trying to work with them, and by now they are offering us about 70,000 carbon credits for our local market. So we are avoiding this other kind of methane emissions in waste management in the cities, in the capital city, and other small municipalities in the state.
Thank you. Making a link to energy, what we're seeing in the energy world is this carbon pricing is really making a difference. And there's two elements of it. One is actually companies being forced to account for the flaring emissions through the actual implementation of policies that have penalties. And a good example is Norway has been very effective. And the second is the importance of extraterritorial policy, things like the carbon methane taxes, the methane performance standard that the EU is developing. So I think that financial incentive is really key. I'd like to just come back to Cross River State and just really talk about the role of subnational governments and how important is that in driving action, and how does it fit in the context of the national federal government?
Thank you very much, Mark. I mean, the role of subnational governments in driving action can actually be overemphasized. Earlier on, we had the breakfast session. We emphasized this point that action will actually is going to take up from the states. It's going to take up from local communities, and that's what translates to action at the national level. For Cross River State, we've always had a good working relationship with the national government, especially around environment, particularly due to the fact that Cross River State's forest, right, is one of the 25 biodiversity hotspots in the world. And not only that, Cross River State hosts 50% of the forest in Nigeria. So we've had this long working relationship. As you know, Nigeria has signed to the GMI and the GMP and all of that, and has made pledges. I mean, I heard when Governor Kim spoke about making a pledge around methane emissions reduction. Nigeria is a signatory to that, and in 2021, I believe, Nigeria signed a law which essentially established the National Council on Climate Change. Now, that council is meant to work with state governments to drive policy down at state government. And I'm glad to also announce that Cross River State has taken action in setting up its own Council on Climate Change to also drive some of this action down. We recognize also the need for funding in this sector, because as I was speaking with some of our colleagues earlier, just right behind strategy implementation is funding. So I believe conversations around where and how we're actually going to find the funding to do some of the projects that we have envisaged is important, especially when we're at events such as this. So that's the way in which Cross River State government is partnering with national, but it's not enough. I believe partnerships like the CHAMP, for instance, helps to promote some of the strategies that we're trying to develop, especially on intergovernmental levels. So we encourage that, and we're going to keep working to see how we can drive some of this change in action.
Thank you. Last comment from the Deputy First Minister. Maybe you're not yet a member of the Subnational Methane Action Coalition, but there's some great learnings from our two colleagues here. What are your reflections, and what does it mean? What could they mean for Wales?
The biggest reflection is, and in fact this is my first experience of coming to this event as well, I've been taken aback by the potential for shared learning. We're all trying to wrestle with the same conundrums here. It won't be that the same solution is applicable in every context, in every locality, but I bet some of the answers we're looking for are out there amongst people here in the audience here, as well as on the panel. I also take a note of optimism as well. What you're achieving doesn't come easy. What we're doing in landfill reduction doesn't come easy. What we've done in recycling has been quite a journey. We went first. You were asking the question about, well, how do subnational governments play a role in this? Well, within the UK, we're part of 4 nations under the umbrella of the UK. One of the concepts within that is that we can innovate. We can trial stuff. We can prove concept. And that's what we did with recycling. We went early, we went hard, it was difficult, we're still going through some of the difficulties, we had to take people with us. But we went through that process of now, every local authority now in Wales driving up their doorstep recycling, splitting the waste, splitting the compostable material away from the different types of material, so it then ends up, I'm a big rugby fan, so excuse my just illustration here. One example, I recently went to, in Port Talbot, a big traditional working class area, a company in traditional waste management that is now receiving the split elements that the households and the workplaces, because we've done that now as well, workplace split in as well, it's coming to them because it's clean. They are now using that recyclist in order to turn it into new products, so the whole supply chain gains. So I think one of my reflections is as well how much we have to work together and how much on the ground level, in the actions that we take, we will drive change and we will innovate, and we've just got to learn from each other how to do it.
Thank you, and I think that's a really sort of nice sort of way to sort of close the session, that there's really such a lot of opportunity, there's such a lot of empowerment that we can create by driving this, there's such a lot of collaboration and opportunity for business to play a key role here. And I think as these opportunities will only become more and more visible as the rise of data through new satellites come on stream, and I think there's all to play for. So congratulations to all 3 of you for the leadership you've shown and for the passion and commitment. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think I'd like to hand back to Marcelo, who's going to make some closing comments, but thank you.
Great, thank you. So I just want to close off saying methane has contributed to nearly half the warming we've experienced to date, but also around 40% of that comes from energy, 60% we saw from food production and food waste. Bringing back why methane is important, 0.5 degrees of current warming come from methane. If we reduce emissions by the levels that some of our leaders have put forward today, if the world follows, it would be 0.3 degrees by 2040, which is really making the difference between 1.5 degree goal being alive or not. And so it is the fastest way to reduce temperature within our lifetime, but we could also see how this contributes to food security, energy security, and lowering the cost of waste management, which are unfortunately rising everywhere, right? We have momentum on our side, the 157 countries that have joined the Global Methane Pledge. We also had China and the US have the non-CO2 and methane summit in which they both commit to do this and sending a signal to the rest of the countries that this is something that need to be done. On a subnational level, for example, in India, 9 out of the 22 states actually have developed short-lived mitigation plans that include methane. So even if the national government is not necessarily leading the way, we have this dynamic, which is really great, of having subnationals pushing this. But I also wanted to just put something on the table too. Most of the jurisdictions don't have a lot of control of a lot of things that are done on national level, but there's one thing that they do have a lot more control, which is the waste management. And I just wanted to give you an example. So Carbon Mapper was launched this last August, and it's already on its way to publishing its first data sources. And this is really important because in many places, this is actually probably the largest source of pollution jurisdictions have. If you go to Buenos Aires, for example, they've got 28 tons an hour of methane, which is like 1.5 million cars in one place, right? So fixing it is something doable. And once you start looking at the data that's already there, many, many cities, unfortunately, exceed 5 tons an hour. And that's like 400,000 cars in one place. So these are things that we could do. And there's something that I could hear, probably imagine you guys resonate. This is what I'm going to say right now, resonates a lot. Waste management costs are excessive today. Distances that are being taken are longer and longer, right? We're having, incineration being some sort of not very much of a sustainable solution necessarily. And in the case of my city, my cities that I had to go oversee in Chile, Ancud is a city in an island that actually, when the trash, they rarely have money to even take out the trash, right? But when you have to add 700 kilometers driving it, right, and 60% of that trash being something we could have treated differently, locally, right? Because nobody wants landfills anymore, but we can't have these decentralized composting facilities that are easier to permit than others, so, and lowering the cost. So I wanted to say that, yes, it's a difficult thing, but there's things that are within the mandate of local governments to manage. And that's why I think it's such a great thing. But also the dynamic of putting pressure on national governments. Because when we heard the governor from Korea, he was talking about ambition that actually exceeds sometimes what their own governments put together. This is a dynamic that Cal EPA has also known very well. Ayana Garcia, I think she's around here somewhere, that put together has been leading and with the work that you guys have been doing on the subnational level. Under MOU was something I personally signed when I was Minister of Environment for Chile, and it was a really great thing because it was the first group that actually was talking about 2-degree targets. Now it's 1.5, but of course it was very important in this moment. So I wanted to thank you all for attending this event. Thank all the different participants for coming here. Thank you all for the comments that you provided, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks so much. Thank you.